Probably the story that I want your folks' opinion on the most in this is a very interesting piece from Jonathan Kaufman through Eater, and it's called Whose Dish Is It Anyway? And I wanted to give you both sides of this story because as a business owner and as someone who has, contributed towards ideas that another chef has used on a menu that was 100% their name, I have varying thoughts, and I want to hear your thoughts because it's very muddy, and it can get very slimy, and it can get very ego-driven. And so, let's start by, you can read the full article if you want, and then you can come back to this, but I'm wanting to give you examples from both sides. So, I want to give you some examples first that defend the restaurants. So, Vartan Abgarian, the chef and co-owner of Yours Truly in Los Angeles, which opened in March, says that when he moved on from his last job at 71 and above, he had no regrets about leaving behind customer favorites like poached oysters topped with uni and caviar and a cured and whipped egg served over chorizo bolognese. Quote, "I was a person who was hired to do a creative job. I got paid for that work. It belongs to them." End quote. And then we're going to talk about this company called Butcher and Bee, where one of the owners there wrote in an email, "My position and the restaurant's position is that if a team member develops something while working for us, they can take that thing and generate success for themselves with it, be it a more senior or exciting role with a different company or to create their own business. We do not try to stop them or stand in their way." And then the last point that kind of defends restaurants, Chad Robertson from Tartine weighs in saying, quote, "Either no one's going to care or a lot of people are going to make this, and it's going to push us and keep us on our toes." End quote. Basically saying, like, if this thing blows up, you have to let people run with it and understand that it's going to get copied a million times. But then you can't rest on your laurels and you have to kind of move on and come up with the next thing. I think that someone who's done an incredible job with that is Dominique Ansel. Right? The cronut happened, everybody copied it, but then he came up with his own new desserts. Okay, so let's pivot and talk about defending the chefs, right? Like we have to defend the people who were on the employee side, the people who contributed possibly the legwork and the IP, the intellectual property. Cynthia Wong from Butcher and Bee says, quote, "You work your whole life to create a catalog of things that are very stylistically tied to you. So the idea that you pass them up when you leave a job is absurd." So in leaving Butcher and Bee, she hired an attorney whose name is Steven Sidman, and he scoffed at some of the legal language that he sees restaurants using. Quote, "Merely calling a dish a trade secret or work for hire doesn't make either claim legally defensible. On the flip side," he writes in an email, "a chef looking for a legal protection for her best dishes faces the same problem. Quote, the best practice would require her effectively to have her treat her dish as a trade secret and take steps to protect the recipe from being revealed," he writes. "In short, show no one and refuse to write anything down." Then there's this woman named Krista Chase who says, quote, "I have given myself a pep talk. I created some really cool food, delicious things here with a really great team, and I can do that again." End quote. I think that's a really interesting insight where it's like, you did this thing in your career for a time. That's a chapter. We're turning the page. There's this guy named Kevin Tien, and he says, "They'd still be great dishes. But I think at the end of the day, the perception would be, oh, he's just resting on his laurels." And this is talking about, taking something that you did at a restaurant and then opening your own concept and then doing it at that time. And then Tien says, quote, "For me, when it comes to building a dish, there are multiple recipes built into it. I'm not going to ban you from doing any of those components. As long as it's not an exact replica of the dish at this restaurant, it doesn't really matter." End quote. And so from the lawyer's perspective, the lawyer actually gives the advice of document everything, because if a restaurant does take you to court and you come up with a peach dish or a way to prepare peaches, And you document that entire process. And then when you try to leave and say that you want to do that at your next project, and the restaurant says, you can't do that, that's ours. If you want to pursue legal action, you have all this evidence showing that you did all this stuff and that was your idea. So again, from both camps, right? You are executing on this thing, your peach dish, at a restaurant where they are sticking their neck out. They are bringing the audience to you, right? Regardless of the press you get on the peach dish before or after you've released it. You're using the product that they're paying for. You did not have to put up any financial or, yes, you had to give your time to this restaurant, but they are taking all of the risk by giving you this platform to showcase your ideas. And I just wish that it was a little bit more cut and dry, right? But it's not. It gets very muddy and very slimy. And so, yes, I would encourage you to document as much as possible if you are the type of person that's going to get wrapped up in that, right? It's also so time focused, right? Like if you spend a year at a place and come up with a few ideas and then leave, you might not be all that tied to it. But if you spend 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years at a place, you've probably contributed a lot to the identity of this project. So then when you leave, you've probably done things. There's that quote that gets brought up every time I mention this, where Thomas Keller gives the advice to Grant Achatz on like a grapefruit dish. And he says, that if you serve this grapefruit dish at French Laundry, you can never claim that this is your idea anymore. Like, this is my dish now because I'm the chef of the French Laundry. And you're one of my sous chefs, right? I think it's just an interesting mentality to have where it's like you want to give, in order to do well at your job, you have to give your all and you have to be creatively contributing constantly. And you don't want to leave any of your good ideas. You don't want to hold yourself back because you want to see the project do well that you're working on, and that's paying your bills. But then on the other hand, it's like you don't want to be held to somebody else's, you don't want to be a victim of somebody else. You don't want to be making someone else famous. Or maybe you do. It's so individual, and I don't want any of you to think that it's wrong this goes back to the point about Rene Redzepi and Noma and him having partners. Like if you're the type of person that finds a lot of comfort in knowing that someone else is handling the numbers or the front of house or the back end or the whatever, and you just want to be able to cook, you might be able to get all those accolades, but it might not ever be your project. And then I think about this I went to this dinner at this place here in Seattle where the chef bought the restaurant after the owner died. And he's been working for the company for like decades. And so it's like he eventually just lasted long enough, or, just by circumstance, unfortunate circumstance, because this person passed away, now got this ownership of this place where he probably wouldn't have otherwise. And so I would love for you to weigh in. Do you think that, chefs, if they come up with that idea, it's their property? Or do you see it from the restaurant's perspective a little bit more where like they're ponying up these resources? Let me know in the comments. Let me know on Twitter. It's very interesting to me. Where for the first time in a long time, we're seeing people like, I remember Jenner Tomaska at Next when he was chef de cuisine there. He had like just as many followers as the restaurant. That's very interesting. That's like an unprecedented thing in our culture where, because of the way that social media is these days, when Jenner puts out a post, it gets seen by just as many people as if the restaurant would. So fascinating. Okay, last story, I promise. For some reason, it's not showing up on my desktop, but thank goodness for Notion, I have it here. There we go, it's back.